it right now. Okay, now we're live.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So we can talk about, we're all here and we can talk about the power and influence.
So the different power things was like the coercive, reward, legitimate power.
Yeah.
There should be like a table of them somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's on like 152.
Yeah, the different sources of power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on like 152.
Yep.
So, are we supposed to just do like examples of how like when we use the power, or?
Yeah, I think just like examples of when you've seen other people use that power or when we've used that power, and even us as followers probably.
Yeah, like what we've used on other people and then what other people have used on us. Maybe that's worked for us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll start out then. I know that like as a follower, for me, reward power like works the best, but like I don't really care about like tangible things. Like, yeah, like a bigger salary is nice at the end of the day, but it's, I think like intangible rewards, like your boss being like proud of you is like the best for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very distracted by the dog. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, your dog's cute.
The other one's like playing with a squeaky toy behind the laptop. So if he gets loud, just tell me.
Like Kaitlyn, I like the reward power, but I like being financially rewarded. That's at the end of the day, that's why I go to work, and that's what motivates me. Mm-hmm. And I work in a job that it's like a sales job. So it's very, she talked about that in her little YouTube video about sales jobs being, using reward power a lot. So that's something I'm used to and I really like.
Yeah, mine's similar to that. Reward power, like my job is commission based. So, I mean, sales too. So you're rewarded off of how well you do. The same thing goes with like if you get a bonus based solely off of your performance. So it kind of gives you the power to dictate how much you get paid, as well as it gives your boss the power to say, hey, if you don't make these stats, you're not going to get a reward for it. I think that's definitely something that works for me. If it's someone else using it against me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to like agree back in Tim and Mark that just like, I mean, like he said, I mean, I go to work for the financial like compensation or whatever it is. And then having that type of like rewards based thing, because I'm like looking to go into sales, especially after I graduate, that it's just like kind of one of those things where if it wasn't like that and you didn't have it commission based, that like you could see where like some people or like others might start to kind of like lose the motivation to continue to work hard once they've kind of like, met their quota, if that's what it is, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, like the expert power and the legitimate power, because usually when I first start, like when I'm in a group and I have to work on a project or at work, at first I am more legitimate power as in, oh, I know they're the manager, I know they're the boss, so I'm going to follow them no matter what kind of thing, just because I want to be respectful. I want people to like me and know I'm here for the right reasons. But then like slowly I realized who the manager or who the boss or the leader is as a person. So then I feel like I'm more into expert power, like basing them off of who they are rather than their position. Because there are times where I'm like, okay, I know you're the boss. Like I know you're higher up than me, but I don't really have a lot of respect for you because of who you are as a person or like the values that you've shown me in the workplace. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, you're saying the expert power doesn't really work for you.
Yeah. No. I'm saying like expert power would work because I'm like basing it off of you as a person rather than the position. Well, but at first, when I like first get in a situation, I'm more seeing like, oh, who's legitimately in power. Like I don't want to mess with like what's already set in place, and I don't want to be rude. But then like after a while, like I could have a completely different feeling about you if you've like rubbed me the wrong way or like you've just like, I don't know. So then I'm like looking more at your personality rather than just your title of who you are at the company.
Well, and like with the personality, like how, like what your kind of performance has been. Like even if you are in like a position of power, but you're kind of like not someone who does the work or carries their own weight, then it's kind of like, I think over time you'd start to lose the legitimacy for like their, you know, the respect that you had for them.
Yeah.
I think all of that's like that referent power where it's just, it was like role model power. So if you look up to somebody, like if I, like me personally, if I'm in a leadership role, that's the kind of power I like to implement where, you know, like you were saying, like if you don't like them, you don't want to follow them. But like with referent power, you pretty much do stuff specifically because you like your leader.
Yeah.
Like for me, it'd be like, I want the people that are following me to at least like me or admire, or just look up to me like as a role model. So
yeah, I like that one too.
For me, I mean, obviously I like relate to the reward power and everything because obviously I work, you know, stuff like that. But the information power was kind of interesting to me just because it talks about like whoever has the more information, like it talks about like public relations and marketers and salespeople like that. And that's kind of the career like I'm going into a little bit with like public relations and like media and stuff like that. So it seemed really cool to like I don't know, for a person to have all this information and them to be the one who can be a leader and be able to help other people with all the information that they have and are like capable with. And for me, it kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with expert power because if you have all the information, then you're kind of in, I guess you wouldn't necessarily be an expert, but like low key, you're an expert because you have all the information. So I don't know, they kind of went together for me.
Yeah, I feel like even though they're all different powers, I feel like they can go together. Like you can show different stuff. Like with the reward power, like you can reward people and do stuff, but you can also be using a lot of information to manage and to show people your power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kind of going along with like what Andrew said, I feel like there's like the manager, but then there's like the person that like actually knows what's going on. That the manager is always like, oh, go ask that person. Oh, go ask that person. Like they'll actually know the answer to your question. Like I'm just the manager, right? So like it might be someone that's been there forever that never got into a leadership role. Like maybe that's just like they didn't have the qualities, but you kind of like just end up never going and asking your manager because they're just going to keep referring to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So then like you start bypassing them because you're like, well, I'm just going to go ask them because I know they'll know it.
Right.
Yeah. The only reason why that annoys me is just because there's not really like, there's a lack of communication because I know that a manager can't do every single thing. And so they're like divvying up different powers to different people. But where I come in, I'm just like, I'm confused because I'm going to you, but I didn't know like this person was specifically in charge of this. You know what I mean? So I think it's definitely important to know like who is in power with the different.
Yeah.
Like, just, I don't know, just like better organization, honestly.
So I think we've like pretty much covered what works for us as followers.
Yeah.
Like what, I guess, powers have you guys used like as leaders? Like
I've managed for a couple of years at my job, and I think that the legitimate and the coercive powers are good to employ at the beginning. And then I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I kind of will use different powers with different guys because I've had a couple guys that worked for me for years, and then there's always new people coming in. So I tend to use like the coercive and legitimate power to begin with guys to kind of establish a hierarchy more or less. And then, kind of adjust as time goes on.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I don't know about the other ones, but coercive, definitely. I used to work at the Boys and Girls Club, so I work with like little kids, and coercive is pretty much like coercive and like reward, I guess, would be the only ones that really work with children. So I had to employ a lot of those.
for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about parenting and kids and stuff like that when I was reading those ones too, because I feel like a lot of parents will do that, and they'll even say like, "Oh, I don't want to bribe my kids," but like they'll still do it. They'll still use the reward power. But I guess I don't know. Like everybody can do stuff differently. But I think it is like when they're at a young age, you're wanting them to understand like this is good, this is bad. Like you're not wanting them to think you just don't care. You kind of have to do like drastic things, like you're getting a punishment or you're getting a reward. So, but
yeah, I think those three are like the big ones, like, or at least from like my experience, the coercive reward and legitimate power. I think it's just like over time, those things are going to change, and especially like as the situations change, like depending on what you're doing or what your work is, that like you should be using all three of those, especially if you're like able to. Just because I think like different situations and like over time that you need to start to kind of change the way that you do it. Like obviously, when you talk about like the Boys and Girls Club or something, like you're probably going to have to keep treating kids like the same way, just because it's like an age group that would like be at, you know, like a Boys and Girls Club or something. But if you're like working with people where you're maybe like in a manager's position or like on the same level with people, that you're going to have to over time adjust and like, you know, start to use different types of power, I guess.
At my like last job, I think, because I was like kind of a manager. I'm at a new job now, so I can't really like talk about it, like my experience there too much. But I was like super young when I was a manager, so people like didn't really respect me. They just kind of did because I had the title. So that was like, I think legitimate power maybe. But then like I actually started knowing how to do my job like really well. So I would like have the answers to like a lot of questions. So then I kind of employed that like expert power, and then people would just like come to me with questions, which was pretty dope.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm like the same way as Mark, where I don't have like a specific. If I can, I like to. My go-to is referent, just because I want people to like me.
Yeah.
Like that's. I feel like for me, that's the easiest way, just because I'm outgoing. So if I can get someone to like me and just do things specifically because I said so, it's nice. It sounds manipulative, but like in a different way. But like it really changes with like each situation. So like if we have someone who like I have kids that are like in my management role, we've had high school kids before that come in. At my old job, it was a retail, so we'd have like high schoolers come in, and it was they would need like a coercive power kind of thing for them because they don't listen to you unless you punish them sometimes.
Yeah.
And then as they like mature a little bit, you can alternate between that and reward and say, okay, like you've been doing better, like here's a reward. And then just I mean really like for me it depends on what the person, whoever is following or whoever I'm leading. I would implement all of them if I can. Just I think it changes with the person over time too.
Yeah.
So like the last thing in the prompt that we haven't really covered is ways in which cultural difference may influence the way we interact with leaders and employ power.
So with culture, I don't know. Like I was reading a lot about it in the book today because I was like looking over it, and I don't know. It could just be anything, like any differences that you have with people. And so I know that I wish I had like specific examples, but my grandma, I can talk about my grandma. My grandma is from Hong Kong. And so, yeah, so she's Chinese, but she's been working as like a principal secretary at a school for years and years and years and years. And so like I've just seen her, she's a great communicator, but she's had to really work to get there, if that makes any sense, because even though she speaks English fluently, she still has things that she does that people just don't understand. So she'll be trying to like tell you something or explain, and she's like, what are you saying? And so there's sometimes like I don't want to call it like a language loss because they're still speaking English to each other, but she just does things differently because of her culture and because of where she grew up in Hong Kong. And so I haven't necessarily seen that like in my own life, a lot of differences, but even just like the way people talk to each other, that you might be confused and not sure like what they're saying.
Yeah, and a lot of the differences between like low and high context cultures is like the nonverbal communication. So
yeah,
that's a big part of it.
We talked about it. Was it last week's discussion? It was like that paternalistic leadership.
Oh yeah.
Like I think a lot of that, like I think it was the U.S. that implements that most, but like I think it ties in with the culture, like in any leadership role, where if you go to especially Asia or even Latin America, where it's like the people there are very respectful to each other, especially people in like a position of power. Whereas here, like my boss can tell me to do something, and I'd be like, yeah, sure, and then like go behind her back and be like, yeah, this guy sucks or she sucks, and then like over there, like in Asia, like you wouldn't do that. You're very like respectful towards the people that are leading you, even if you disagree with what they're saying. Like it's just like instilled in them that you respect your leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that's a good like example from like I worked at a like Chinese food restaurant, and like I think I might have talked about this the last time that we were in like our group discussion, but it was kind of funny with like how all the management and stuff were like family members, and you could kind of just tell that like just the respect they have for like not only just family but like also like their leaders. Like I feel like sometimes in like cultures like the United States and stuff like that, like people want to almost like know why you're asking them to do something as opposed to just like blindly sometimes following it. And then like sometimes like with people like that, it might be easier to kind of put like the reasonings behind like why you do things the way that you do them, so that people can try to have like a better grasp of it. When like in other cultures, there like it wouldn't even be like acceptable to really like ask why or want to know why. It would kind of just be like, because I said so, but like just like respect it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Andrew, like my only real experience with working with other cultures was I'll bartend at my friend's Mexican restaurant, and it's just all like family owned and ran. But it was like, it's interesting, like they took me in almost as like another family member and like look out for me in that way, and like just are really caring. And so that's like really different compared to other jobs I've worked where you don't feel that family atmosphere.
Definitely.
Yeah. I like when I was in high school, I grew up in like a border town in Texas, so it was like heavily Hispanic. So all the jobs I worked where it was like every week there was like a birthday party or like a marriage or something, and everyone was invited. Like everyone at work was family. So you would go to it and it'd be like it's weird at first. Well, I guess it depends on like your scenario too, or like cultural wise, I guess. So if it's something you're not used to, it might seem a little off. But once you're in that environment and you do it more often, it becomes like, hey, like these aren't just like my coworkers and boss. This is pretty much a family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's totally different. Well, does anybody else have anything to say?
Nope.
I'm good.
Well, cool. I'm glad we had this discussion. I hope everybody has a good night.